I was within 24 hours of signing over my entire medical empire and a $5 million trust fund to my only son, but a hidden microphone inside my late wife's empty hospice room revealed a truth so grotesque that I decided to chemically and financially vivisect his entire existence instead. Grab a cold drink, lock your doors, and pay close attention, because the monsters in this story wore stethoscopes and called me Dad. If you believe that blood doesn't justify betrayal, leave a comment with the number 1 right now and hit subscribe. You will want to hear every single second of this autopsy. Listen to me very carefully. Absolute hatred is not born from a sudden explosion. It is meticulously cultured in the dark, like a lethal strain of bacteria. I am Raymond Vance, a retired chief medical examiner and forensic pathologist. For 35 years, my hands sliced through the cold flesh of the dead to find the hidden lies the living left behind. I thought I had seen every shade of human depravity, but I never expected to find the most venomous parasites living under my own roof, sleeping in my guest rooms, and eating from my silver plates. My son Julian and his wife Evelyn thought they had perfectly staged the final act of my life. They thought because my hair was silver and my eyes were heavy with grief from losing my beloved wife Martha, that my sharp mind had gone blunt. They whispered about my cognitive decline in front of our family friends. They fake-sighed at dinner parties, dropping calculated hints that the great Dr. Raymond Vance was losing his grip on reality. But 3 days ago, on a freezing Tuesday afternoon, I stood inside the intensive care wing of my own former hospital. Martha's bed was stripped bare. She had passed exactly 2 weeks prior. I had gone back to collect her final personal effects. The room was supposed to be empty, but as my fingers touched the handle of the heavy wooden door, I heard her voice. Not Martha's, Evelyn's. It was followed by my son's low, rumbling laugh. The gap in the door frame was barely an inch wide, but it was wide enough for a dagger to pass through and pierce my soul. The old fool actually drank the entire pot of chamomile tea this morning, Evelyn sneered, her voice dripping with venomous amusement. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't even hold his fountain pen. The neurologist will sign the incompetence petition by Friday, Julian. $5 million in the trust, plus the deed to the Boston clinics. It's finally ours. My own son, the boy whose broken bones I had set, the boy whose medical school tuition I paid with the sweat of 80-hour work weeks, did not defend me. He didn't hesitate. He let out a cold, sharp laugh that cut through the sterile hospital air. He's been a ghost ever since Mom died anyway, Julian said, his tone casual, as if discussing a piece of old furniture. We're just doing him a favor. The psychiatric facility in Western Mass is completely isolated. He can stare at the walls and babble about his autopsies all day while we run the empire. Just make sure the dosage of his daily medication keeps him sufficiently confused until the signatures are notarized. I stood in that hallway, frozen. My chest didn't tighten. My heart didn't break. Instead, something far more dangerous happened. The grieving father inside me died on that linoleum floor, and the cold, unyielding forensic pathologist took his place. I didn't burst through the door. I didn't scream. Screaming is for the weak. For a master pathologist, when you find a fatal infection, you don't argue with the bacteria, you eradicate it with absolute, scientific precision. To understand the architecture of the execution I was about to perform, you must understand what I was willing to give them. Martha and I built Vance Medical from a single clinic into a network of highly profitable diagnostic centers across New England. When Martha was diagnosed with a degenerative neurological condition a year ago, my world began to fracture. Julian, our only child, had recently married Evelyn, a brilliant but intensely ambitious clinical pharmacist. I thought their presence during Martha's final days was a blessing. I thought their constant attention, their daily brewing of herbal teas for my anxiety, and their eagerness to take over the administrative burden of the clinics was born out of love. I had already instructed my estate attorney to draft the paperwork. I was going to hand Julian the keys to the entire kingdom. The trust fund was fully funded. The corporate transfer documents were sitting on my mahogany desk, requiring only my final signature. I wanted to retire to our cabin in Maine, to be alone with my memories of Martha. I was ready to surrender everything, because I believed a father's final duty was to elevate his offspring. But human greed is an insatiable tumor. It does not stop growing until it kills the host. When I returned to my empty house that night, I didn't touch the tea Evelyn had left warming on the stove. Instead, I poured it into a sterile specimen vial I kept in my old medical bag. I walked down to the basement, where I had a small, private laboratory set up for my consulting work. I ran a comprehensive toxicological screening on the liquid. The results displayed on the digital screen made my blood run colder than any corpse I had ever examined. The tea was heavily laced with nordiazepam, a potent, long-acting sedative. In a man of my age, a daily accumulated dose would cause severe lethargy, short-term memory gaps, confusion, and motor tremors. They weren't waiting for me to lose my mind. They were actively manufacturing my madness. They were poisoning the well of my intellect so they could present me to a judge as a shell of a man incapable of managing my own life. I sat in the dim light of my lab, luring my eyes toward a $1,921 Morgan silver dollar resting on the desk. I flipped it. Catching it in my palm, I felt the cold metal against my skin. The game had officially changed. They wanted to use the medical system as a weapon against the man who had helped build it. They had no idea that I knew every loophole, every authority, and every legal pressure point in that very system. I opened my safe, took out the corporate transfer documents, and ran my fingers over the crisp paper. I didn't tear them. Tears can be replaced. I needed these documents to become the very shackles that would bind them. On Wednesday morning, the first wave of their calculated escalation hit my doorstep. Julian arrived unannounced, accompanied by a man wearing a tailored suit and a grim expression. It was Dr. Kenneth Vance. No relation to us, but a psychiatrist who owed his career advancement to a major donation Julian had made to his research fund using corporate clinic accounts. "Dad," Julian said, his voice a masterclass in synthetic grief. "Dr. Kenneth is just here to do a routine wellness check. We're all very worried about your recent forgetfulness. Evelyn said you left the stove on twice this week. You remember that, don't you?" I looked at my son, executing a perfect performance of a confused, fragile old man. I let my jaw slacken slightly. I allowed my right hand to tremble, noticeably as I rested it on the table. I don't recall the stove, Julian," I mumbled, keeping my voice soft, airy, and uncertain. "My head has been so heavy lately, like a thick fog." Dr. Kenneth nodded solemnly, scribbling notes on a medical clipboard. "Classic signs of rapid onset geriatric dementia compounded by severe bereavement," the doctor murmured, sliding a blue document across the table. "Dr. Vance, for your own safety, we think it's best if you sign this temporary medical proxy. It simply allows Julian to handle your daily medications and healthcare decisions while we find a suitable residential care facility." They thought they were setting a trap. They had no idea I was the one holding the cheese. I picked up the pen with a shaking hand. I looked at the signature line. If I signed my true name, I would surrender my autonomy. Instead, using a technique known well in forensic fraud analysis, I executed a forced coercion signature. I signed my name as R.M. Vance, intentionally omitting my middle name, Edward, and adding a microscopic double loop under the letter V, a signal I had established decades ago, with my personal bank to indicate a transaction made under extreme duress or under the influence of narcotics. The moment the pen left the paper, Julian's eyes flashed with an unholy triumph. He snatched the document so fast he nearly tore it. He couldn't even hide the raw hunger in his face. But their greed didn't stop there. By Thursday morning, my private financial advisor, an old friend from my university days named Charles, called my encrypted personal phone. "Raymond, we have a massive red flag," Charles reported, his voice tight with urgency. "Your son just utilized the medical proxy you signed yesterday to initiate an emergency liquidation of the Martha Vance Memorial Children's Foundation account. That's $2 million intended for the pediatric oncology wing. He's transferring it into an offshore holding company registered in the Cayman Islands under Evelyn's maiden name. Do you want me to block it?" "No," I replied, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "Let the transfer proceed halfway. Tell the compliance department there is a technical delay that will clear exactly at noon on Monday. Let them believe the money is within their grasp. They were bleeding me dry. They were stealing from dead children to fund their luxury lifestyles." That afternoon, I watched through my window as a delivery truck parked outside Julian's house next door. 2 couriers unloaded massive, velvet-lined boxes. Evelyn stepped outside, practically glowing with arrogance. She opened one of the boxes to reveal a custom-designed, diamond-encrusted gold watch and a set of keys to a brand-new Porsche Cayenne that was idling in her driveway. She bought it all using the pending credit line of my children's foundation. They were celebrating their victory before the battle was even over. They thought they had buried the old lion. They had no idea the lion was simply calculating the weight of the dirt he was about to throw back onto their graves. But the true apex of their depravity had not yet been revealed to me. The darkest secrets are never found in bank accounts. They are found in the tissue, in the chemistry, in the final medical charts of the deceased. On Friday night, wrapped in the dark cover of midnight, I used my master security key to enter the Central Medical Records Archive at Vance Medical's main laboratory. I needed to review the final toxicology and laboratory reports from Martha's last 3 weeks of life. Evelyn had been the primary person administering Martha's specialized intravenous pain medication at home. I had trusted her implicitly because of her degree in clinical pharmacy. I pulled up Martha's electronic medical file. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the polished summaries and digging directly into the raw laboratory. Raw data, the serum level reports that were automatically generated by the automated diagnostic machines, but rarely read by the attending physicians. As the columns of numbers aligned on the high-definition monitor, my breath caught in my throat. The room felt completely devoid of oxygen. Martha did not die from a natural acceleration of her disease. The lab reports showed massive, spiking levels of potassium chloride and repeated, toxic overdosages of her prescribed cardiac medication during her final 48 hours. It wasn't a mistake. A clinical pharmacist of Evelyn's caliber would know exactly what those dosages would do. It was a controlled chemical termination. They had deliberately shortened my wife's life to accelerate the inheritance timeline, knowing that my grief would make me vulnerable enough to strip of my assets. My son knew. He had to have known. He signed the final cremation authorization form within 2 hours of her death, bypassing the standard medical examiner review because he held a secondary position on the hospital board. I sat in the dark archive room, staring at the glowing screen. The betrayal was no longer just financial. It was murderous. It was a complete violation of the sacred bond of life and blood. My wife, my beautiful Martha, was murdered by the very people she had welcomed into her heart. The pain inside me burned away, leaving a vacuum of pure, absolute, liquid ice. I did not cry. My tear ducts felt as dry as a desert bone. I looked down at the $1,921 silver dollar in my palm. An eye for an eye. I whispered into the empty room. A life for a life. A complete and utter structural collapse. I spent the rest of the night working with Charles and a specialized unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Healthcare Fraud Division led by an old friend whose life I had saved during a forensic investigation 20 years ago. We didn't build a legal case. We engineered a financial and criminal guillotine. We tied the fraudulent medical proxy, the forced signature, the stolen foundation funds, and the falsified medical records into one massive, inescapable federal indictment. But I didn't want them arrested in a quiet living room. I didn't want them to have the luxury of a private surrender. They wanted to take my empire. I was going to let them stand on the very top of it before I blew the foundation out from beneath their feet. Monday morning arrived. Sharp, cold, and blindingly bright. It was the day of the annual Vance Medical Gala, a massive, televised event held at the Boston Symphony Hall, where Julian was scheduled to receive the prestigious Medical Humanitarian of the Year award and officially announce his ascension to the role of Chief Executive Officer of the entire medical network. The Grand Hall was magnificent, filled to capacity with over 500 doctors, board members, political dignitaries, and media cameras. The air was thick with the scent of expensive champagne, roasted lilies, and overwhelming arrogance. Julian stood on the main stage behind a polished crystal podium, looking immaculate in a tailored tuxedo. Evelyn sat in the front row, wearing an emerald green silk dress, her neck adorned with a dazzling diamond collar that practically blinded the photographers. She looked like a queen who had just conquered a nation. I owe everything to the foundation my father built. Julian's voice boomed through the high-fidelity sound system, his face projecting a mask of profound humility. And though his health unfortunately prevents him from being here today to witness this transition, I promise to carry his legacy into the future with the same honor and integrity. The crowd erupted into thundering applause. Evelyn smiled proudly, raising her glass toward the stage. That is a spectacular lie, Julian. A voice cut through the applause like a thunderclap. The room fell into an instant. Dead silence. 500 heads turned toward the back of the auditorium. I pushed open the double oak doors and walked down the center aisle. I wasn't wearing the old, rumbling coat. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't looking at the floor. I stood tall, dressed in my full, formal academic regalia, the black and gold robes of a distinguished professor of pathology. My footsteps echoed with absolute authority against the polished hardwood floor. Julian's face went completely white, the color draining from his cheeks like a man experiencing a sudden cardiac arrest. "Dad?" he stammered into the live microphone, his voice cracking under the sudden pressure. You shouldn't be here. Security. Please assist my father. He's highly disoriented." 2 security guards stepped forward. But before they could touch me, Special Agent Miller of the FBI, accompanied by 4 uniformed federal officers, stepped out from the wings of the stage. "Stand down," Agent Miller commanded, his voice echoing through the hall. "Nobody touches Dr. Vance." I walked directly to the front of the stage, looking up at my son. "You thought the fog had taken my mind, Julian," I said, my voice calm, precise, and completely amplified by the auxiliary lapel microphone I was wearing. "You thought because I loved you, I would be blind to the venom you and your wife were dripping into my tea. But a forensic pathologist knows how to identify a poison long before it kills the host." Evelyn jumped to her feet, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and terror. "This is absurd. He's crazy. He's suffering from severe dementia. We have the medical proxy signed by his own hand." She screamed toward the media cameras. "You mean the proxy you secured by chemically altering my cognitive state with unauthorized doses of nordiazepam?" I replied, turning my gaze to the large 40-foot digital projection screen behind the podium. "Let's look at the actual diagnostic data, shall we?" With a single nod to Charles in the control booth, the massive screen shifted. The glittering corporate logo of Vance Medical vanished. In its place appeared the official, certified toxicological reports of my blood work, followed by the recorded audio file from my wife's hospice room. Evelyn's sharp, cruel laugh echoed through the grand hall, amplified by the multi-million-dollar audio system. The old fool actually drank the entire pot of chamomile tea this morning. The neurologist will sign the incompetence petition by Friday, Julian. $5 million. It's finally ours. The audience gasped. A collective shockwave of horror rippling through the prestigious crowd. Doctors stood up in disgust. Board members stared at the stage with absolute loathing. And that wasn't your greatest crime, was it, Evelyn? Was it, Julian? I continued, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly low, resonant pitch. The screen shifted again, displaying the raw serum level reports, showing the fatal overdosages of potassium chloride administered to Martha Vance. This is an official federal indictment for first-degree murder, healthcare fraud, grand larceny, and elder abuse, Agent Miller announced, stepping onto the stage and grabbing Julian's wrists. The sharp, metallic click of federal handcuffs echoed through the microphone, broadcasted live to thousands of viewers on the regional medical network. Julian broke completely. He fell to his knees on the stage, weeping hysterically, his expensive tuxedo dragging against the polished wood. Dad, please. It was Evelyn. She planned it all. She told me we needed the money. Dad, look at me. I'm your son, he shrieked, his voice reduced to a pathetic, whimpering crawl. I looked at him, my eyes as cold and unchanging as the granite mountains of Maine. The biological connection between a father and a child is a matter of simple genetics, Julian. But a son is a title earned through loyalty, honor, and love. You didn't just break that title. You murdered the woman who gave you life. Down in the front row, 2 federal agents grabbed Evelyn. She struggled like a wild animal, screaming obscenities, her green silk dress ripping at the shoulder. As they dragged her out, her heel caught on a wire, and she stumbled, her forehead slamming against the edge of a media table. Her diamond collar snapped, the precious stones scattering across the dirty floor like worthless pieces of ice. Julian was pulled down from the stage, his hands secured tightly behind his back. The media cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing every single second of their spectacular public execution. The empire they had tried to steal from me had become the very stage of their eternal damnation. The Grand Symphony Hall cleared out within an hour, leaving only the empty chairs and the faint scent of spilled champagne. The storm was finally over. The structural demolition of their lives was complete. 3 months later, the federal courts stripped Julian and Evelyn of every asset they had ever held. Evelyn was sentenced to life, without the possibility of parole, at a maximum security federal facility. Julian, for his complicity and his signature on the fraudulent documents, received 35 years. He will spend the rest of his youth behind concrete walls, eating from plastic trays, completely forgotten by the world that once applauded him. I sold Vance Medical. I liquidated every single asset, every clinic, and every piece of corporate real estate. I took the entire $55 million and transferred it into a permanent, ironclad independent trust managed by a national bank. Every single dollar is now used to fund a state-of-the-art forensic investigation facility and a special foundation that protects vulnerable elderly citizens from financial exploitation by their relatives. Today, I am sitting on the porch of a small, hand-built cedar cabin on the rocky coast of Maine. The air here is clean, smelling of salt water and ancient pine trees. The wind blows hard against the cliffs. But the foundation of this cabin is anchored deep into the solid granite bedrock. It will never move. I hold the 1,921 Morgan silver dollar in my old fingers, looking out at the endless blue horizon. My life is exceptionally quiet now. I have found a profound, unshakable tranquility. As an expert who spent his entire life analyzing the dead, I learned a final, undeniable truth about the living. In forensic science, you cannot save a body that has already reached total cellular necrosis. You can only cut away the rot to preserve the truth. Life is no different. Unconditional love does not mean allowing yourself to be slaughtered by the parasites you raised. A real father loves his children with all his heart, but a wise father carries a scalpel to remove the cancer before it destroys the entire family. Thank you for spending this hard-earned time with Dad's real-life revenge. Don't let the monsters drink from your cup. Stay sharp, protect your foundation, and until next time, keep your eyes wide open.